Hello and welcome everyone to Amazon Ads Raw Daily. This is episode 100 and it's a very special episode today. And I'll tell you in a little bit why this is a very special episode, not only because it's episode 100 and it's recorded on a Friday and I didn't record for the last 4 days, but for a couple of other reasons as well. But before I go into these reasons, I would love to reflect a little bit on the journey I've been through with this podcast to celebrate 100 episodes. The whole idea kicked off in my head somewhere last year, I would say. People were asking, hey, why don't you do your own podcast and whatsoever? I would listen to it. And I was like, well, I think I'm not the person to do this. And then this year I had the idea of, and the reason why I thought I'm not a person to do a podcast is because I don't want to do things like everybody else does them. All the podcasts are like that and that and that. And I was like thinking, okay, there's already a couple of podcasts I listen to about Amazon advertising, and what can I do different? What can I bring different to the table than what everybody else is doing already? And this different thing, the different approach, just needed to realize, or that just needed to be thought through. And then at the beginning of this year, I thought like, okay, what if I could combine my desire for daily learnings, and this daily learning desire that comes from a very special daily habit we are having within the team, which I created for the team and within the team, and it's kind of all coming from that. So we have a daily team huddle in the morning, and this huddle is 15 minutes, and we are like 7-8 people. So everybody has like 2 minutes to talk, and I started with daily huddles already a couple of years ago, and I really like them. It's like one time a day where you see your team as a team leader. This is very important, to see the team and to understand how are they doing. Do they feel well today? Do they don't feel well today? Are they, overworked? Are they stressed? Are they having maybe issues in their private life, which reflects in their work life as well? So kind of getting a sense of how they feel and a few other things. And over time, I realized that I'm not that much into understanding what they are working on today, what they have finished yesterday. I'm not a micromanager. I'll try to set goals, and then people can just work on the stuff their own most of the time. And so one thing I thought is very interesting, and it was very powerful in the beginning of the Frasio journey with my team, is daily learnings. So everybody shares a small learning from the previous day. Did you discover anything in the ad console which was new for you? Did you try out something new which was new? Did you read a blog or an article or anything interesting which is new for you as a learning? And it doesn't have to be Amazon ads related. It can also be Amazon related, or you learned something new in Excel, or you learned something new in Google Sheets, or whatever. Any kind of small learning you can share, and this can reflect with others that they either say, oh, I didn't know about this, now I know about this as well, and I learned. So it's it's a growth component, a personal growth component for everyone in the team when people are sharing their learning stories. Also, it sparks eventually curiosity and whatever. Let's not talk too much about it, but that was the whole idea. And I found it so powerful in the beginning, and we had so much good learnings in the beginning, that at one point I had the idea, let's just write down all of our daily learnings in a Google Sheet, whatever, and then we'll release a newsletter. Back then, LinkedIn just introduced these newsletter functionalities, and I thought like, yeah, there could be like a daily, not a daily, a weekly newsletter, just composed from our learnings. And this didn't actually happen, but we continued to do the daily learning sessions. And then at one point I thought like, hey, what if I just record a 5-minute podcast each day, where I record my daily learnings, and I just talk about the learnings, maybe add a few opinions around it, and talk about things I learned. And the idea when I started was I want to educate people listening to the podcast. And quickly I realized there's less people listening to this podcast than I was hoping or thinking. So most likely I'm not educating that many people actually listening to the podcast. Maybe it's a handful or two or whatever, who actually learn something from me, from my learnings. And over the journey, over the last 6 months I'm doing this podcast, I realized I'm not doing it for you guys. I'm doing it for myself, because I'm sitting here at home, I'm talking to my computer, I'm not actually talking to you, or any one of you, and there's not much interaction going on. I'm not getting like regular feedbacks or kind of interactions where I talk with listeners. Therefore, this is all very much just about me sitting here, getting up each morning to record a podcast. For those of you who have actually listened to lots of the episodes, they might have realized it's not that easy for me to do this every day. And especially this week, I was not really able to do this every day. And it's very hard with traveling, very hard with holidays. It's also very hard with just doing it every morning. And so over the time, I realized two things. I don't do it for anybody else. I do it for myself. And this is very much okay. It's maybe even the better mindset to just do it for yourself and then don't care about what others get from it, and so on and so forth. As long as I learned something, and I learned a lot doing this. I learned a couple technical things around AI and using AI for the podcast, to create the titles and the descriptions, to come up with the music and the intro and the outro, and a few other things along the way, cutting clips and so on and so forth. So I used many different AI tools along the way, which helped me personally to explore these fields a little bit and work with them. And on the other hand, I created this habit of, I need to record, I need to do this. So it's kind of a very good learning that once I pushed myself into doing it, it's kind of becoming a habit, and it's, rather easy to continue after a while than I thought in the beginning. But to be very honest, along the last 6 months, I had a couple of weeks where I thought like, okay, I need to stop this. This is not doing well for me. It's consuming too much time in the mornings. And to go a bit more into depth, how much time it consumes for me in the mornings, like usually like around, depending on the length of the episode, it consumes 10-15 minutes of recording time, and then eventually 5-10-15 minutes preparation, and 5-10-15 minutes afterwards. So it's not huge time consuming, but it's time consuming. And especially for me, commuting to the office twice or 3 times a week, which is also a 45-minute drive, it kind of adds up to my 8 hours working days, at least. And so over time, it's a time component which I am not able to invest any longer. So that means I'll stop doing Amazon Ads Raw daily, and this is the last episode. And I'm very happy with what I've achieved. I am happy with the outcomes, and a couple of learnings I want to share with you here along the way. One thing, I believe podcast SEO is not a thing at all. I'll try to add descriptions, summaries, and titles to all the episodes and make them relevant at the keywords and so on and so forth. I didn't saw any spike in downloads based on any keywords in the podcast. That leads to the assumption there's no podcast SEO happening in the SEO players. And my current thinking is that's because people are not actually going into their Apple podcast thing and they search for, give me the Amazon PPC podcast. How podcasts are discovered is by either they do some advertising or they are getting like recommended from someone over social or your friends or whatever. So it's more like a recommendation game rather than an SEO game, because over the last 6 months, I would not have seen any increase in downloads over time. And you could think, okay, I have 100 episodes. Everything is around Amazon ads, Amazon PPC. There must be some people searching for that. I don't see that in the data. What I do see, on the other hand, so I don't see this in the podcast app, podcast hosting app. I use Acast to host a podcast because it's free. But I also upload these records to YouTube. And there I have the feeling, and some episodes show this, that certain keywords do work better than others. So usually the episodes gets like, whatever, 10, 20 downloads, but there's like episodes which get much more than the average, 2 or 3 times as much. And you can see it's the episodes which have an interestingly more generic keyword in the title. Something like Jeff Bezos framework, or Google is in trial, or something like that. So it seems on YouTube, SEO does make sense. In the for the podcast itself, it doesn't make sense. And I had the biggest spike in downloads and in listeners in the moment I was announcing my podcast on LinkedIn. That was at episode 20 or 25 or something like that. So I started the podcast secretly to see if I could get listeners kind of organically. And I had a few little, I don't know. I sent it to a couple of people privately. And then I announced it on LinkedIn that I actually have a podcast. And then I had the highest spike in downloads and listeners in that week ever, even 75 episodes later. So it seems that the social power here coming from my LinkedIn post, and everybody was like curious to see what's going on there and what is this guy doing, me, helped me to get new listeners. And you could see after that spike, there was a new plateau of listeners. So eventually some of you people who are actually listening to the podcast have been coming through that post and are listening since then. And so I truly believe it's a social game, it's a recommendation game, and therefore my idea of the podcast doesn't work to scale. My idea of the podcast is I don't have guests, I do it all on my own. It's a kind of a newsy, opinion-based podcast. And if I want to grow it, people need to find it that interesting that they tell their friends, hey, you need to listen to this thing here. While on the other hand, if you do a podcast where you invite guests and you have a guest every week, which is interesting, and where people want to listen to opinions and so on and so forth, then you have the social power of these people as well. They're like posting your podcast on their social because they have been a guest there, and maybe they have like 15,000 people, and then eventually 10 people stick with the podcast, which didn't know that you exist before. So with guests, you can scale a thing. And you can see that from many of the big podcasts, they're all having like guests, kind of, or you need to create a unique value from the podcast that is so interesting that people are recommending. And I truly believe that I cannot do this in a 5-minute, 10-minute news like podcast around Amazon ads. I also feel that the preparation time I had is not enough to really go into really deep into topics. So I have a couple of ideas how I would change in the future. So I'm not saying this is the end of Amazon Ads Raw forever. I'm just saying it's the end of Amazon Ads Raw Daily, and I will not do the daily show anymore. I might do a different show. I'll have to think about this, and I'm currently very much not able to think about lots of different things. So there's lots of things going on in my life, and I need a little bit time to reflect and to come up with an idea of how I want to continue with Amazon Ads Raw. I like the name Amazon Ads Raw, and I like to educate people. I like to talk about these things. Therefore, I will somehow continue, but I'm not sure yet how to do. And with that, yeah, I'm almost closing out the episode today, but I also wanted to share some news around Amazon Ads and the ecosystem, which I found interesting. So you'll get what you expected. And this is some updates from the Amazon Ads Advanced Tool Center again, from the API system. There was an announcement yesterday on goal-based sponsored brand campaigns. So the announcement is, let me quickly release notes, read about it. Sponsored brands may increase or decrease bids to help achieve goals. So if you have set up a goal-based sponsored brand campaign, goal-based means it's a rather new type, which is only available over the API. These goal-based campaigns can either drive brand impression share or page visits. That's a goal you need to set via the API for the different campaigns. And if you have set the goal to drive page visits, then now these campaigns are dynamic bid up and down automatically. You cannot change it. So if it's drive page visits with the CPC cost type, Amazon has changed the bidding to be dynamically up and down for those. I guess you guys know my opinion about Amazon changing things, which drives up bids automatically without any control. But if you don't, I'm not a fan. The other announcement is sponsored display forecasting for clicks and viewable impressions is now available across all countries. It seems sponsored display has improved the forecasting API by adding clicks and viewable impressions. So there's now more metrics you can get from the sponsored display forecasting API. We talked about this last week. I'm not sure if I'll think that's very much useful. But now that's a big API announcement, actually. Amazon Posts, a thing which exists since 2019, only in the US. They have never rolled it out to any country outside of the US. Amazon Posts has made a huge leap from being this single page entity into the ad console. Since a couple of months, you can manage your Amazon Posts within the ad console. I thought this would bring much more value to the product, to Amazon Post itself, and much more relevancy. I'm not sure if this actually worked. I actually think it hasn't. But now they're announcing that you can create posts via the Amazon Ads API. In the US, obviously. Advertisers in the US can now create posts via the Amazon Ads API, or sellers and vendors now have access to brand profile to create posts. To have a brand profile, you must be registered, blah, 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 and combine Creative Assets API and Post API. You can automate post creation and the publishing process. Previously, advertisers needed to have a store before they could create post profile and could not reuse the existing images assets available in the created asset library when creating posts. With this launch, some new capabilities include store dependency removed. Advertisers no longer need to have a store to create post profile, making the process much sooner with the introduction of brand profiles. Asset reuse. Advertisers can reuse an existing image asset available in the creative asset library to create posts. That seems to me like a good signal for Amazon posts. Amazon makes it easier. No stores anymore. And Amazon, for the first time, offers an option to create posts in bulk. That was always my biggest problem with posts. You need to create them manually inside the ad console, and you could schedule them. At some point, they started to introduce the scheduling function, and then you could kind of sit down for 2 hours, just create the posts for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever you want to do. But it was still a manual process. Now with the API, you would be able to basically, sorry for the wording here, to basically pump out Amazon posts every day, right? What do you need for an Amazon post? You need an asset, and it seems you can use your creative asset library now. So if your brand is not brand new, but it has some assets already existing, or you just upload everything to the asset library, then you can use these assets. You need custom images, obviously, kind of not product images, but like these lifestyle images. So you need an image, you need at least one ASIN connected. You can connect up to 5, I believe. They changed it from 10 to 5, I think. I'm not 100% sure here. But you can connect an ASIN, or you have to connect at least one ASIN, and then you write a caption. This caption can be up to, I think, 2,000 characters or something like that. And now what you could do is let an AI write these captions based on your products and come up with a process that creates Amazon posts with all your different lifestyle images on your ASINs for the next couple of weeks and months. And then you'll have eventually a free to, like, it doesn't cost anything to post. There's no fees associated. And eventually these posts will be displayed on different placements on Amazon, like on a product detail page, but it can also they can also appear in the storefronts, and maybe even on competitors or somewhere else. So if you have a team which can help you setting this up over the API, then I would recommend to do it. This is free impressions. Every post will set up, which gets impressions or clicks or even sales, is almost free, except obviously for the time to create these. But with the API, once you set up a process to automatically create them, it's kind of a no-brainer. So that's very, very interesting for me. Check it out. And then the very last update in news for today, and then we'll close the session. Amazon communities. Amazon communities are currently a big thing. Last week, an Amazon community called $1 Trillion Seller has emerged and is going live, and there's a couple of 100 people already in that community. And this week 2 new communities have also emerged. So it seems like within 7 days, at least 3 communities which I am aware of have been launched. The $1 Trillion community, which is a Slack-based community. Everything is invite only, obviously. It's like a closed community systems. Then you have the Amazon Society, which is a Discord-based community. And the Amazon Ads, what's it called? Amazon Ads podcast community. So this is around Amazon Ads. It's interesting to see like that many different communities emerging at the moment, and people trying to get together bright minds, and hopefully there's some interesting discussions going on and emerging from these communities. And a couple of thoughts on communities. I think communities are very, very much valuable if you get the right people into these communities and if they spark the right conversations. It's a very thin balancing act between, not having just anybody in there who's just repeating evergreen, whatever knowledge, and it's kind of repetitive and not innovative and not new. And you're like, okay, I know about all this stuff already. It's boring. It doesn't interest me any longer. And then you lose like a couple of people. And you also don't want to have people in there who are doing sales the whole time and who are advertising for themselves or for their services or for their companies. So it's a very thin balancing act. You don't want to have too many people in that because it creates a chaos, but you also need a critical amount of people in order to, have an active community, because with 3 people, maybe the community is not that active. So it's, I think it's very hard to create such a community, but if you're able to pull that up, then you'll have created a very valuable asset for the community members and for yourself. So yeah, I'll keep you posted about this. Obviously very interesting for me. So last things before we close it. I said this now twice. But yeah, the really last things. Guys, if you enjoyed, guys, girls, men, women, whoever listens to this podcast, if you enjoyed any or all of the last 100 episodes, I'm very happy to receive feedback, emails, or LinkedIn messages. So you can message me on LinkedIn. Just search for Alexander Swade. That's my name. On LinkedIn, write me a message. If you can't write me a message there, send me an email. My email address is amazonadsraw@gmail.com. That's one word, and it's Amazon ads raw, ADSRRAW, amazonadsraw@gmail.com. Just write me a message over there. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you don't like. Let me know what you would like to see in the future coming from me. Yeah, just write me there if you enjoyed it, or write me there if you don't enjoy it as well. Tell me what you didn't enjoy it. And with that, thank you very much for listening to 100 episodes of Amazon Ads Raw Daily. Pretty sure we'll see us around. Take care. Have a wonderful rest to your week, and bye-bye. And don't forget to stay curious.